Now, here's a question. Who should be entitled to come and work in this country? Just last week, we brought you those immigration figures. They made for grim reading. Net migration hits the 745,000 mark. This number is clearly unsustainable. 3,000 people a day. At this rate, our population would be about 80 million by 2040. A reminder, that's just 16 years away. Can anyone with a straight face say this is OK and workable? So what is the solution? Now, this is largely an issue of welfare versus immigration. We have more people on some form of benefit than ever before. That often takes them out of the job market. Do you really believe that 2.5 million people are sick? Because if you do, then don't moan about immigration. These two are intrinsically linked. Some of the unemployment figures around the country are more than a little alarming. Here's some examples. In Greater Manchester, 18% of the city are on out-of-work benefits. In Birmingham, Glasgow and Liverpool, 20% of those cities are on out-of-work benefits. In Middlesbrough, 23%. Blackpool, 25%. So we're left with the extraordinary revelation that in some parts of the country, a quarter of an entire city are on the dole. Are you buying that? A quarter of the population can't find a job in a country with 1 million job vacancies. I don't believe any of this. And this is where it gets tricky, because immigration provides cheap labour, and all the while you have 25% of some cities not working. This suits certain businesses just fine. Following this argument, we need to look at the benefit system. But as we know, any government that even begins to tinker with welfare stands accused of being callous and uncaring. Charities launch lawsuits and people protest. It's a fine line, and governments mess with welfare at their peril. In Jeremy Hunt's financial statement last week, he attempted to go there, and already the pitchforks are out for him. Today we hear the Home Office wants to accept proposals to ditch what is called the shortage occupation list. This allows employers to hire foreign workers at 20% below the going rate in their industry. Now, the list contains dozens of jobs across a wide range of industries, as well as including occupations such as care worker, engineer and bricklayer. The list also includes ballet dancers and graphic designers. Now, do we really have a shortage of bricklayers? And what's the deal with ballet dancers? Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick also has drawn up a set of proposals to attempt to cut immigration. One of his ideas is to require a minimum annual salary of £35,000 in order to receive a work visa. This brings in skilled professionals and means locals here will take up those other jobs. But you would have to tinker with someone's benefits to make that a reality. And so we wind up again in this vicious circle. Tweaking with the benefits won't cut it. A wholesale reform of welfare is what is needed. But for the benefit of this conversation, let's concentrate on who we want to come to the UK. So if we are short of care workers, and we are chronically short of them, do we just import people from elsewhere? The other option is to have a gazillion vacancies, or we force people who are currently unemployed to become care workers. You begin to see how tricky this is. So let's ask the question: who should be entitled to come to work in the United Kingdom? We'll open the phone lines on this now, 0344 499 1000. We'll go to your calls later in the show. Joining me now to discuss this, former Conservative government advisor James Price is with us. It is the mother of all conundrums. Every government, James, has faced this kind of curious dilemma. It's cheap labour, there are vacancies out there. Is it the welfare system that's wrong? Is it the immigration system that's wrong? Rishi Sunak's under a lot of pressure on this.
Absolutely. As you say, it's a really, really difficult issue. And I think it's so difficult because you've got all the economic arguments, and there are good arguments for, and there are lots of good ones against as well. And then you go into the much thornier things about society and about culture that politicians are really bad at actually talking about.
Yeah.
So we can go, if we look at economics of it, as you say, people will come in, they'll work below the minimum wage. We saw wages get depressed when the European Union was expanded about 20 years ago. Lots of Polish people and others coming into this country, they work really, really hard, excellent workers, really hungry for it, great. You're now seeing Poland get richer, for example, and lots of Poles moving back again. So we have to look somewhere else. Okay, fine. Poland and the UK have great long links with each other. Lots of Polish people fought in the RAF and the war, all these sorts of things. Where else do you start looking then? You see, then we go from the economics intercultural issues, and that's just that in microcosm.
And who'd have thought? Did you know we're short of ballet dancers? I had no idea we're short of ballet dancers.
I imagine that is something like you've got a specialist ballerina from Russia or something wants to come over, just like you know,
Yes.
we would relax these for about footballers. I think in France they had a problem of wanting to cap people's salaries.
Yeah.
Well, then that way the top French league footballers wouldn't be able to come in and get paid
They
these
don't let
things.
any old chancer just pirouette around the stage over there at the Royal Court, whatever it is. But we are short, apparently, of bricklayers and graphic design. I mean, I find that incredible. Bricklaying, certainly when I was at school, some kids left school, didn't want to go to university, whatever, didn't have the chance to, maybe. Bricklaying was a pretty noble gig, really. Everyone needs bricklayers. It was quite well paid back then as well. Graphic designers, I mean, that's a proper trade as well.
I think it's all about, because the system is now so complicated, you talked about one of the visa schemes there are all sorts of these other different schemes, and businesses are desperate to get these people in because it's much cheaper to employ these people than it is to retrain someone else. It's obviously expensive to train somebody in this country. We've been quite bad with vocational technical training for a long time. Things like T-levels that are being brought in now that I worked on, I think excellent ideas. That sort of training I think is important. But we get to the problem now of, are you just going to keep juicing the economy with cheap labour like this? Is that really a nice way to treat people? Thinking, oh, it's fine, these people will come in and do the jobs that Brits won't do. I don't think that's a nice way to think about people. And given last week in Hunt's awesome statement you talked about, there was this amazing idea called full expensing. So you could write off big capital stuff inside factories and plants against your tax bill. Amazing idea. So now you could start to invest money in things like that. You don't need to have quite as many people coming in that way. So the government's almost talking in two different ways. Investing capital so you don't need as much cheap labour. And at the same time, we're talking, we want lots of labour in. I think at the end of the day, for your viewers and listeners, it comes down to a point of quality over quantity is an easy way to think about who we should have in this country.
I said this the other day about Robert Jenrick. He's the immigration minister, of course. And I actually had to, despite doing this for a living, I had to look him up to remember that he was still... That I thought, did they lose him in the last reshuffle? Because he's going a bit rogue, Mr Jenrick, isn't he, it seems? He's more Team Braverman at the moment, it seems.
I think that anybody who goes into the Home Office, they could be a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed Liberal, and they spend all their day dealing with terrorists and rapists who need deporting and horrible stories like this. I think it's enough to probably radicalise almost anybody.
I think you're probably right, including Mr Jenrick, maybe. Refugees on the streets this Christmas. Thousands could be on the streets. This is partly due to this sort of clampdown on hotels and all the rest of it. And so we are trying to address one problem and then creating another one.
Right, you just mentioned there, in 16 years' time, we could have a population of 80 million people. At a time when we're building about 100-something thousand houses a year. This is where we need a dose of Margaret Thatcher's kind of common sense analogies about this. Anyone at home will know you can't do that. We're not building enough houses as it is because of various restrictions and NIMBYs not wanting houses built in their backyards, all these sorts of stories. You do that at the same time that you're bringing in 700,000 people in a year. Even if they're the most talented people in the world, where are we going to put everybody? Where am I going to live? Where are you going to live?